In the autumn of 1889, beneath the gray sweep of the Pennines, a village named Ashmere slept with its shutters barred and its stories salted. On the moor beyond the last hedgerow stood a low-walled enclosure, and within it a tomb of granite, carved with a blunt sword and known to the villagers as the Silent Knight's Tomb. Sir Gideon Radcliffe had returned from far colonies in 1871 and been laid beneath that slab. His estate kept locked trunks of copper and papers, and his servants spoke of a procession that buried men in secrecy. Rumor held that companions lay with him, men bound by oath, set down as if to stand guard in death. In 1912, a mason, Elias Thorne, pried at a flagstone and found beneath the earth a narrow stair and a sealed iron door. He descended with a lantern and did not return. His lantern was later found at the well, its flame cold and the cap beside it threaded with fine, filthy grass. The constable fined talk away, but strangers followed, men in long coats and women with veils who spoke of ledgers, trusts, and securing the site. The Reverend Martin Hale entered the stair in 1933 and left with his hands trembling. He wrote only in a letter to a London journal, "The names carved within are listening." Officials from a London office arrived, their ledger stamped 47/KS, and documents were conveyed to drawers in Whitehall that were thereafter opened only by those who already knew to look away. When excavation took place during the siege years of 1940, workmen uncovered niches sealed with plinths. The first plinth yielded a child's shoe and the bones of a man bound at the wrists. Above it ran a line scored by a small hand, "We keep the silence." The villagers stopped ringing bells. Between those public episodes were quieter things recorded in marginalia. Midnight visits by men from the Admiralty, a paper trail signed by an Inspector Langley, and in 1953 a series of letters bearing the cipher of Operation Quietus. Langley was a man of clipped speech who wrote that they had located a construct of acoustic fixation and recommended controlled exposure. The letters describe experiments of a most sedentary cruelty. At intervals, a recorder would play a low tone within the sealed chamber, while observers took notes on the faces of those who listened. One entry notes a child who began to hum, and thereafter could not recall the names of his parents. Another reports a laborer who spoke plainly one morning, and by dusk could not remember the word for home. The apparatus recovered in 1998 matched descriptions in Langley's letters: fluted brass rods, a ring of miniature teeth, and plates scored with names. Langley's marginalia had included a drawing of a small wheel of ivory set with tiny cogs. He annotated, "Key to tuning, teeth worn by repeated insertion." The working theory among the men who studied these pages was that the mechanism produced a frequency which bled memory into a held place, an echo room for names. Those who listened without protection found names slipping into the throat like coins, and then sliding down into a hollow in the mouth that could not be returned. There is also mention of a ceremony in 1903 at which the Radcliffe household invited a society that called itself the Keepers of Quiet. They arrived in masks, plain white, with no mouth, and robes stitched with dull thread. The society's ledger, later copied but never fully recovered, recorded the donation of a breathing casket and a pledge to safeguard speech. Servants were sworn and paid in coin. The maid Agnes Mallory, who survived to tell of the night, insisted that a child's lullaby was sung by men whose faces were covered. She remembered the casket as if it inhaled when placed upon the table, as if it had lungs. Among the more unsettling artifacts were notes left by children themselves, tiny squares of vellum found tucked into ledgers and under floorboards. One, dated 1921 and written in a careful childish script, read, "We put the names in a hole, and the hole sang back. We play so the lid will not open." Another, from 1944, contained a drawing of a man with his mouth sewn in by small, neat stitches. Scholars argue about whether these are metaphor or evidence. Villagers never argued. They burned the papers and taught their own to hush. A number of the masked visitors kept records under names that never appeared in directories. And Mrs. Ormond, long-faced and pale, supervised the cataloging of badges and toys. She kept a ledger of children's voices and was said to hum constantly. An operative who later broke from the commission described, in an affidavit smuggled abroad, a rehearsal in which men and women would whisper the child's names into a bowl of water and then cover it with a cloth. The bowl would form a minute ring upon the surface, as if a small thing beneath fought to be named. The custodial commission's methods were clinical and also superstitious. They issued sealed boxes and posted notices that read only in bureaucratese, restricted cultural artifact. Yet inside the boxes were toys, lockets, and for some reason an old wooden child's chair carved with initials. The commission's reports often end in ellipses. Men entrusted with the records retired early or found small lapses in memory, an address forgotten, a childhood photograph missing a face. Time did not heal Ashmere, it accreted. The children who walked past the slab in 1964, the three who vanished after the hollow song, were later spoken of in whispers. A memorial cross was set on the moor in 1970, though the names upon it were smudged almost at once. Pilgrims that followed curiosity into the lane reported strange dreams. They dreamed of being small and of reciting words that would not stay in the mouth. One painter who set his easel upon the ridge painted his canvas black. When he returned, the black had a thin gloss over it, like wet teeth. The instruments used by those who studied the tomb recorded phenomena that seemed to sit between physics and superstition, harmonics that expanded when children sang, a temperature that sank where teeth had been set, a registration on audio tapes of a rustling like many feet. Technicians wrote notes in margins. There is a threshold in which names slip out of grammar and become objects. They are then placed and kept. Even so, the tomb resisted explanation. Architects proposed that the niches were an early attempt at a repository for curiosities. Psychologists supposed a mass delusion. Men of the church supplicated and wrote exorcisms in spidery script. Each explanation seemed to account for part and to fracture before the silence. A journalist named Miriam Calder published dispatches in 1958 and named Pembroke as a family once attached to the estate. She vanished from public life. Children in 1964 found a rusted badge, GR, upon its face and played beside the slab. For 7 nights, a hollow song came across the moor. On the 8th, 3 children went into the bracken and were not seen again. The village filled wells and put up gates, but some nights a clink like distant metal was reported by travelers. By the 1970s, the Custodial Commission, men whose vans bore no insignia, was cataloging Ashmere. They photographed the tomb and took measurements with instruments that reported faint, anomalous vibrations. A memorandum leaked in 1979 spoke of Project Selene in resonant persons and hinted that the tomb operated as a sort of acoustic constraint, a mechanism designed to capture what it called voices that demand names. The memorandum recommended containment. Men who read it later found, in their own notebooks, marginalia they did not recall writing. An old maid, Agnes Mallory, recalled in 1986 a masked procession from 1903 that set down a breathing casket and taught servants to hold the silence. She mimed fingers closing upon a throat. "If you utter the name," she said, "you will be asked to sing." A graduate, Daniel Harrow, discovered by study that the niches aligned to a lunar interval recorded in a mariner's almanac. On March 3, 1998, the lunar anniversary, he opened the iron door with 2 companions. They found a brass apparatus set within oak, 2 fluted rods and a ring of unused teeth, tiny and arranged like teeth for a key. A copper plate read, half Latin, half cipher, "For the keeper who cannot hold his tongue." When the rods were touched, they sang, and the sound, Daniel wrote, asked for names. Afterwards, the 3 were altered. Peter Godwin twitched at iron. Ruth Calder hummed a phrase and refused to speak of children. Daniel grew thin and begged the commission to seal the chamber, writing, "They are not dead, they are kept." And they listened for any voice that would demand a name. The commission resealed the door. In 2007, a television crew filmed the slab and caught, on thermal imaging, a print of a child's hand upon the stone. Their footage and the reporter's tape vanished, and a child's shoe appeared upon the reporter's doorstep. A lecturer who reduced the tale to melodrama received by post the brass badge of GR and a note in childish hand. "He is quiet when we are careful." He later suffered a curious lapse of memory about his youth and left his post. Today, Ashmere persists as a pale refusal on satellite maps. A patch of moor where roads blur and a fog sits patient upon the ridge. Pilgrims come and find only a cold wind. Some leave flowers, some leave with tremors that are not accounted for by weather. Men in plain suits, custodians, bureaucrats, or something older, still visit under the guise of routine, set their clipped instruments upon the slab, and watch for changes in the earth whisper.